Tanse, hello, and welcome to the Matriarch Movement podcast. I'm your host, Shayla Ouellette Stonechild, and I'm super excited to have Kaitlin B. Curtice here with me today. She's an award-winning author, poet, and public speaker. She's an enrolled citizen of the Potawatomi Nation whose work explores the intersections of spirituality, identity, and decolonization. Kaitlin is the author of Native, Identity, Belonging, and Rediscovering God, and Living Resistance, an Indigenous vision for seeking wholeness every day. And she also has a growing series of children's books celebrating the seasons through Indigenous teachings. I myself actually grabbed a copy of the Living Resistance one, and I have to say I'm only like a chapter in, but I love the way that you describe pretty elaborate concepts, but ground it in spirituality in a very poetic way. So, Kaitlin, thank you so much for being here. If you just want to introduce yourself to the audience, where you're from, and perhaps a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah. Bonjour, Kaitlin Curtice Indigenous. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaitlin Curtice. I'm a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation, and I have been an author and a poet and storyteller and public speaker for about a decade now. I really, really love this work. I live near Philadelphia with my family in Turtle Island, and I have been writing words as a form of healing and just care, even for myself, since I was young. So words have just always been my medicine personally, and so it's really been a gift for me to share that with other people, and try to hold space for our collective healing as well as our individual healing together through words. So I'm really honored to be here.
Is there a specific Indigenous word or a teaching that's anchoring you right now in this moment of your life?
That's such a good question.
I know. I love the language, and I feel
Oh,
like you learn so much from
you
just
do.
Indigenous language.
Um, well, this is one that I've always loved, and I think I've been thinking about it a lot because it's getting really warm here, so it's feeling like summertime finally. And our word or phrase for like the early morning is "minowabin," and it's to me it's like a phrase of saying like it is good when the sun shines on you. So it's this
Mm.
way of like um, just welcoming grandfather son in relationship in the mornings. And, I think that that's just earlier in the morning, you feel that pull to just step outside and just bask in the sun, even for a moment, and say Minawab and say good morning, and just have that sort of declaration that it is good to be alive, that it is good that every morning the sun rises and shines on us, and we have that possibility of life and care. I think that that's like such a simple lesson, but is one that we will always be learning as human beings. And I've held on to it for a long time.
Could you say it again? How do you say it?
Minowabin, Minowabin.
Metawabin. Metawabin. So when the sun rises?
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you
yeah,
for sharing that.
yeah.
In Native, you discuss the journey of reclaiming your Potawatomi identity, and I'm curious, how has this process influenced your understanding of belonging both within Indigenous and within Christian communities?
hmm Yeah, I live by the term liminality, which is that, gray area, the complexity that a lot of us from different identities or different belief systems, whatever it may be, that we have complex spaces that we live in, and I think that has always been the case for me. I grew up um, in between Oklahoma and New Mexico. I was born in Oklahoma, and my father worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and so, but my both of my grandmas actually were like secretaries in the Southern Baptist Church. So I had this strong influence of being around Native people, but also being within Christianity and being around it. So it was a really interesting thing for me. And then we moved away from Oklahoma, New Mexico, and moved to Missouri when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And my parents got divorced not long after that. And then that's already such a tender age. 8 and 9 is such a tender age. And so having that sort of conflict and split in my identities was really difficult. And then a few years later, my mom got remarried to a Southern Baptist pastor who's my stepdad. And that just became then I was like deeply sort of enmeshed into this form of Christianity that many of us, at least in the US, know. It can be really toxic and really difficult, actually. And so I was enmeshed in that and sort of at the loss of my Potawatomi identity, like I didn't know how to hold all of it. And so I felt like there was this huge shift. And then as I got older, when I became a mom, there were these questions, that kept bubbling up. I studied social work in college. Like these little moments would bubble up where I just think, my ancestors and the world was sort of calling me back and trying to help me find a way to enter in to the fullness of who I am. And so that has been a lot of my journey as a writer, is to help people process like difficult identities and how do they go together. And I will say that my spirituality is quite expansive. Sometimes the label Christian doesn't feel right in the context of what we're living in the US. I'm highly influenced as well by like Celtic Christianity, because I have some Celtic ancestry. So it's a much more sort of universal spirituality, but it's important for me to talk about what I grew up in so that people can understand that even within Christianity, there is a more expansiveness than what many of us in the West have been given, that can help us hold space for being Indigenous, being from different cultural backgrounds, and being able to show up fully as who we are is really important for me to help people know that.
What is the difference between Christianity and Celtic Christianity?
Um, Christianity in the West, for a lot of us, has been influenced heavily by colonialism, and so that's what we have inherited. I went to Northern Ireland last year, and it was just really meaningful for me to learn about sort of this way of practicing spirituality that can be rooted in what some people would call pagan spiritualities, which, as being Indigenous globally, we are called pagan often. So that idea of a pagan earth-based spirituality, but then also this influence of Christianity. And in Celtic spirituality, Celtic Christianity, I've come to understand that it has blended really beautifully, to where it is still understanding tenets of Christianity, but being very earth-based. And so that part of it is really grounded a lot like many Indigenous cultures would be, So there's a woman named Saint Bridget, and she is a Celtic sort of goddess, but also a Christian saint. And so she is this liminal balance. And there's this story about her being born in a doorway. So this whole idea that, even her parents came from different identities. She lives multiple identities and lived her life as a healer, and is recognized as all of who she is. And I think that is really beautiful for me to understand that in a time when we really, really need and want boxes sometimes, that we don't always fit neatly into all the boxes. And it's okay to be expansive outside of those boxes and still be who you are.
To pretty much like make your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you reconciled the tensions, I guess, between being Indigenous, but then also speaking and working with predominantly white Christian communities? I'm curious how that's been for you.
Yeah, it's been really hard. And there are ways in which I've, like for a lot of my speaking events, I've chosen to also do other events. Like I do a lot more interfaith work now. Do a lot more retreats in different spaces that are more diverse, which is really life-giving for me, because I did realize that um, part of the problem here is that when a space has like an Indigenous speaker, it can be sort of something to check off the diversity box. And I felt that a lot. And I felt like I would show up to speak, especially at churches and things like that. And I had to come to a point for me that um, I didn't have to give more than what I was giving, that it's up to them then to change things and make decisions that can change things. Like there's so much work to be done. And my work is to bring my words and bring my medicine and leave that. And they can decide what to do with it, you know? And I think for a while I was putting more pressure on myself to give even more than I really could.
Mm.
And so I had to be really honest a few years in with the capacity I have, with the energy I'm able to give. And, um, things like I cut down like question and answer times in a lot of
Mm.
spaces because I found it to be really triggering because people aren't informed enough to ask thoughtful questions. They were asking questions that they weren't ready to ask yet. And so it was really triggering. So I had to make decisions and boundaries to protect myself in a lot of those spaces. And I'm really grateful for a lot of the relationships I've made with allies and people who are really trying to do good work. But for myself, I've also had to learn a lot of hard lessons about how to sort of protect myself and my energy and to make sure I'm also entering spaces that just feel really good and safe for me. So
Hmm.
I'm moving toward that a lot as well as not as much of those spaces. Also trying to be in other spaces as well.
Right, right. You mentioned boundaries, and I know in some of your keynotes you've mentioned rituals. I'm
Mhm.
curious what those look like for you, having kind of indigenous spirituality and then also believing in Christianity. Are
Yeah.
rituals allowed in Christianity, or is this? Yeah, I'm so curious how both of those operate.
I think it's interesting because so we don't go to church anywhere, so we're not a part of institutional Christianity. So in that way, for me, that's a lot different because I'm not like in a community where I might be at a church like taking communion with other people where you like
Mm.
dip the bread in the wine and those kinds of rituals. I don't participate in right now, and so that is different. It's kind of like in our indigenous communities if you're not being able to do ceremony with other people, you know.
Mm.
But I think that a lot of I remember when I learned my first like Potawatomi prayer.
Mm.
And it was a few years back. I think I write about it in Native, like how impactful it was for me to realize that I don't always have to pray in English. Like to be able to pray in Potawatomi and pray um, in the vein of spirituality that my ancestors practiced was so meaningful for me. And so beginning to incorporate that into my spirituality was huge. And I do a lot of like journaling and sort of those moments of ritual, journaling and reading and using like my sage and tobacco like my medicines. And so that's a real gift to be able to sort of bring those different elements together. And so much of my personal spirituality is asking questions. Like I have a
Mm.
lot of questions that to be expansive in how we see the world, like we just have so many questions to ask and that's totally okay. And so holding space for questions and gathering with other people who are in spiritual spaces to ask questions as well is a real gift for me. Like my Substack community is a space where we do a lot of writing ritual together. And it's called the Liminality Journal. Again, just people who need liminal space. And we just finished a whole month of spiritual practice of poetry writing. So I would send all through May, I would send one word each day that was like a word to help us write a poem. And so being able to share like terms and ideas that are really important to me and asking them to write something and see what comes up and share that is such a beautiful like communal ritual of healing through words, but using our spirit to do it. And I think those kinds of things that are universal enough that we can bring different beliefs and identities together is such a gift, and I really enjoy facilitating that for people.
It sounds like you've created a community that is very creative and also very curious
Yeah.
and comes from a lot of different cultures. Is writing something you mentioned you started writing as a child. I'm curious where
Mhm.
you've drawn inspiration from for each of the books you have written. Where did that come to? Where did you get the idea to write Native? Where did you get the idea
Yeah.
to write Living in Resistance?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm trying to remember. Sometimes I remember like the moment, like when the idea for Living Resistance came to me when I was vacuuming my living room. Like I was just, it was like just happened to be a moment where it like showed up and I was like, oh, that's the book. And then I had to stop and
Sweet.
like go write it down, and then it sort of unfolded. Native, I knew after I wrote my first book in 2017. It was called Glory Happening. And it was just a series of like essays and prayers. And I knew after that book that I wanted the next book to be about being Native, about being Potawatomi and my struggle within Christianity. And I knew that would be the next book. And then our Potawatomi flood story is just a really special story to me. So I centered the book around that. And it was a hard book to write because I was digging into
Mm,
my life. You're digging into trauma and beautiful things and hard things. But it was such a gift to write. And then I wrote Living Resistance, and that one is centered around these realms that I created that are sort of based off the medicine wheel, inspired by that, our cyclical ways of living. And I actually have a new book coming out in October called Everything is a Story. And
mm,
it was so fun to write that one because I am a storyteller, and so many of our storytelling traditions, we believe that stories are alive, that they live in the world. And so that one was so much fun to like research and write. And that one came to me pretty quickly after I wrote Living Resistance. I knew I wanted to like
mm,
return to my roots as a storyteller and write about the power of stories. So that one
mm.
I'm really excited about.
I'm excited for all of them. I still have to finish Living in Resistance. I have to say, though, for me personally, in my own spiritual journey, I would say probably about 5 years ago, I felt very connected to the term resistance because I
Mm,
felt like in that era of my life, I was very rebellious and I was questioning everything about education, religion,
yeah.
consciousness, everything. And so I felt very resistant to, I guess, the
Yeah.
programming of
Mm-hmm.
the colonial life and
Mm-hmm.
colonization. But then I noticed, like, after 2 years of working with the word resistance, it's almost like I, started feeling that on my own resistance in my own body, and it was almost like it was shutting down
Mm,
because, in a way, I was acting from a place of anger and
right.
resentment, and
Yeah.
so now I have to say I kind of moved away from the term resistance because I didn't like the way it was energetically feeling in my
Yeah.
body, and so to be honest, when I first saw your book, I was like, "Oh, I feel like I would have really loved this book 2 years ago." And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Is this book calling to me right now?" But obviously, because 'cause you're an Indigenous author and I love the work that you do, I was like, "I'm gonna buy it anyway." And I'm curious how you would define resistance because I
Yeah.
think in the dictionary, it is like an act of working against something. And
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
I'm curious what your definition of resistance is.
Yeah. So, what I love to do in my books is like take an idea or a term or something we think we know really well and like sort of turn it and look at it differently. And resistance is one of those words that like, yeah, when I'm living in a state of like rage and anger, I burn out really quickly. Like I can't hold it for very long. I'm a fairly sensitive person, so
Same.
so like my resistance can't maintain with that kind of
Mhm.
energy for very long. And so I was like, how can this, term like look and feel different? And so the way that I sort of define it is in the book is um, how we use our everyday lives to exert energy against the dangerous status quo of our time. But what
Mm,
I really try to make clear for people is like that can be so many things though. And it can be soft. Like resistance can be you tending to your garden, and it can be you cooking a nourishing meal and taking care of yourself. And it can be showing up to a protest, and it can be taking care of your elders, and it can be loving the earth and changing government systems. So like trying to help people understand like even this idea of resistance is, yes, we're pushing against something, but we're also like dreaming of the world on the other side of that. And
mm,
it's and I want people to feel that like um like more like holistic kind of energy of it, that it
Mm,
can be our anger, but it can also be like our compassion and our hope and our sadness, and like all of these emotions and all of who we are can actually become what our resistance is. And if we can look at it in a more holistic way, maybe it can be more sustainable.
right. And is that where the four realms come into play that you're
Yeah.
talking about? Could you speak to the listeners of what those four realms are?
Yeah. So let me grab I have a little card. I'll show it to you so
Sweet.
that I can talk about it as I show it to you. We made these beautiful little cards to go with the book, which I love. So these are
Sweet.
the realms of resistance. And so the top one is the personal realm, and
Mm,
it's this beautiful red color, and it's sort of our winter season. So it's like our Potawatomi word for heart is de. So that your de is your heart center. It's where everything comes from. It's your lifeblood. And so winter is our like time to go inward and process. So your personal realm is that time for you. And then the communal realm is this brown one, and it represents spring, and like it's the time to plant seeds, and it's the time to build community, and to go into a different space where we're taking care of each other, and that's important. I think I write about um, like adoption and Indigenous kids and the
mm,
adoption process, and the issues with all of that. I've written about boarding schools. So talking about like how are we caring about each other's children as well as our own? How are we
mm,
caring about each other's communities as well? And then the blue is our ancestral realm, and that's like blue water, very fluid realm of summertime, and thinking about how we are ancestors in the making, and we're connected to somebody. Somebody came
mm.
before us, and what are the lessons we need to learn from them, no matter who we are and who we come from. That's an important thing for us to pay attention to. And then the middle is the integral realm. So it's this idea of integrating, and it's our fire. The
Mm,
Potawatomi
sweet.
word for fire is shkode. It's one of my favorite words, shkode. And fire is just so important to us, because how do we keep our own fire burning, and how do we keep this idea of resistance sustainable, and kind of that time where we're sort of gathering all these lessons that we've been learning into ourselves. And I really want it to be cyclical and not linear, because
Right.
people are so linear. So trying to help people understand that our life seasons, you may be deep in the personal realm, but tomorrow you may be deep in the communal realm, and
Mm,
you can move around in them, and you don't have to start in one and end in the other. Like our whole life, we're going to be moving through these realms, and that's what being human is. And so it was really fun to create this, to give people like a visual, and a
yeah.
way to move through it. I love creating like frameworks like this that are different, just to help people grasp things better. So, yeah.
Yeah, for the listeners that are listening through audio, it was like a Venn diagram of all the different realms she was showing. Thank you so much for sharing that. For you personally, I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you honor each realm within your own life? How does that
Mm.
activism show up in everyday life for you?
Um, the personal realm is amazing and always hard to like care for myself. Like
Yeah.
I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is like a chronic hormonal disorder earlier this year. And so, just being in my 30s and trying to take care of myself and my body and all of who I am, and being an author, and then taking what I'm learning and putting it into words is really important to me. But that means like I have to be taking care of myself, to keep doing this work. And so that's been really important. And just a huge part of my personal work is that like care on a daily basis it has to be consistent. Um, the communal realm, uh, it's been really special over the last few years to form like relationships with just communities of other writers, and asking
Mm,
like how are we using our words as medicine and caring for each other and our readers. Even like I believe that when I write a book, like it's a living being too, and like when you get it, like you're entering into who I am, but who the book is too. Like, it has its own
Right.
energy and its own life force. And I want the things that I write to be um, healing and to be part of community work. And so that's really important for me. And I really love supporting other writers, especially women, especially Indigenous women writers, and helping them just keep going and not give up, because the publishing industry is colonial. And so we have to like take care of each other and all of that as well. Um, and then the ancestral realm, this one's been really healing for me, actually, and just um, having different role models and elders just sort of like take me under their wing and
Mm.
help me find the courage to access the ancestral realm even for myself has been really beautiful. Like, even in the last year, just um like just for us to have the bravery to know that we have access to our ancestors. Like, we know that in our
Mhm.
minds, but do we know it like in our bodies and in our daily lives? And like when I play my drum, that
Mm.
there's something that opens up there. And like when I pray, there's something that opens up there. And I think that that needs to become, at least for me, even more of my practice. I just forget sometimes that I need to pause and do that. So that's been huge for me. And then the Shkode, the fire part of it, the integration for me is just that image of maintaining this work and having it be sustainable. That um, we just are such a like hustle culture, and I have to keep that image of this work, you know, the longevity of it, being able to really hold it for a long time. And that means that I have to be paying attention to how I use social media, or how I
Mm.
use my liminality journal, what I write there, like all of the spaces I inhabit. How am I like tending to that fire and making my own resistance work like last my whole life, and to not burn out. I just don't want us to burn out, and we often do because we're going too hard or too fast, and we just need a pace. We all have a different pace, all of us do, but like, what pace do we need to go at that makes the work more sustainable? And that I love having conversations about that with people.
Sweet. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I love how you anchor and embody the realms that you speak of in different ways. And I know listeners can probably be inspired to hopefully focus on one realm and then maybe go
Yeah.
into the next when they're ready. You did mention the power of storytelling and of sharing our own stories and of writing. I'm curious what your advice is for the younger generation of Indigenous writers that are out there and are maybe not knowing where to start or are maybe feeling overwhelmed by even just putting their story onto paper. What are
Mhm.
some ways that you started writing?
Mhm. Um, I started writing because I knew how much I needed it, and it was like,
Mm.
more than anything, it was a matter of daily survival for me. I mean, I've been writing since I was young, and my writing was really this last year, I actually went back and read all of my journals from like age 8. I have them all
Oh, wow.
somehow. And I decided like I wanted to, and some of them are really hard to read because I grew up in a faith that was very legalistic and very like, I felt guilty and horrible all the time. Like it was a kind of Christianity that's very like, God is looking down on you and you're sinning all the
Mm.
time. And so my journals are, a lot of them are really painful, but I knew I needed to go back and read them and see myself through those words, like see the little girl, the teenager that I was, and how much I wanted to like love and care for the world. Like, I could see
Mm.
that in my words. Like, that's who I was then, it's who I still want to be. And I was writing because I needed some tie to that like sacred force in the world of healing and of love. And that never went away. And so when my first son was born in, I guess, uh, 2013, um, 2011, sorry, I started a blog, and it was just called like Stories. And I just knew I needed to write. And I just would go to a coffee shop and read for hours, and then I would go home and write. And I just knew I needed it. And so um I just want them to know, like, when you know you need something, whatever your
Mhm.
craft is, whatever that hobby or passion as it shows up, don't let go of it. Even if it doesn't become like the thing you do in life. If your
Mm.
passion is writing, but you don't want to become a writer, but you need it, like don't let go of it. Like write in all of the ways you need to write, get up early in the mornings, write, stay up late sometimes, write, like let it guide you because um, the things that we're passionate about are so important. And when we let go of them, like we lose ourselves and we become so kind of disoriented in the world. And so it's so important to just hold on to the things that feed our souls and motivate us. And I knew I needed words and I still need them. I still love writing so much. Like I don't know. I think my other writing friends think I'm really a writing like nerd because I love book writing so much, but it's just because I need it and I love it. And so um if they have something like that and if it is writing, to just press in and let the words come, and you can edit later, you can work it all out later. But I'm so grateful I have all these journals because I have random poems and songs I wrote and all of these things that were just pouring out of me without filter because it was my private like journal. And I'm so glad I have that now because it is a window into who I've always been, and I can see myself in a more holistic way. And that same thing will happen for them if they just trust themselves and lean into their voice and their courage. And I love that young people are showing up to that. I mean, it's such a
Mhm.
beautiful thing. It's so beautiful.
It is, and I feel like as much as it is beautiful, I'm also a little bit concerned because we are now moving into the future of AI,
Yeah.
and I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of what I'm seeing online, even when it comes to captions or other things, I feel like is being written by AI. So I'm
Yeah.
curious what you think of this rise of technology
Hmm.
and, how it's even gonna affect the literature space.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess, yeah, just if you have any thoughts about the rise of AI and how to
Hmm.
also keep our culture connected to ourselves and grounded
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
still alive. Because I think for me, I look at AI as now a tool, but then through that, you lose some of your own creativity and autonomy to write for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it can definitely be a helpful tool. And as humans, we often take things too far once we have something. So I do worry a lot about it. And what I think that, as writers, I think we are all like, and I know actors and like script writers and stuff too, it's really scary. Like, will will anyone need books written by humans anymore?
Yeah.
Um, I think they will though. And I think that that's like, my new book is like following the life cycle of a story by following the life cycle of an oak tree from the acorn to the mature oak. And I don't know if AI could have figured all that out. Like
True.
I want to believe that my sort of spiritual compass can still create things that AI can't. But it is still really scary. And I think what I think of this is sort of with technology just in general is we need to just keep returning to the land and
Yeah.
returning to like keep doing the things that ground us with the earth, because the more that we get separated from that, like that is when things can go really wrong. And that separation has always harmed everyone, like all humans. That separation from Mother Earth has always been harmful. And so I think about it even with this, like um we can't just we can't just escape into the virtual world. We can't ignore our own voice and intuition. And a lot of that, to maintain that, we need to keep returning to the lands and the waters. And like for us that means like holding with care our indigenous identities and practices and communities, like taking care of that and maintaining it. And so that's going to be hard, I think, in the coming years, is
Mhm.
to encourage people like keep returning to the plants, return to the lands around you, and like listen to the earth, and don't just give in to whatever is easy and easily consumed. And I
Mhm.
think that's going to be hard.
Mhm. Yeah, it's almost like the convenience is why people are so drawn to it.
Yes. Yes.
In
Yeah.
one of your talks, you do mention 5 ways to help people reclaim their connection to Mother Earth. I was wondering if you had any ways that you would speak of during this conversation of ways people can actually embody reconnecting to the earth and
Mhm.
reclaiming earth-based wisdom?
Yeah. Um, I think always, I tell people like reading books by Indigenous authors is a great way to begin reframing our minds around that. We have like the embodiment of being with the earth that is
Mhm.
going to allow a lot of healing. But we also need like I want people to read my book and understand, like, oh, I should think in a more cyclical way. Oh, I should start honoring the seasons. Oh, I could do a meal outside when I have a seasonal change. Oh, I could have a fire. That would be a really beautiful, it's like you begin to build a different way of being in the world. And I
Mhm.
think that all of those small steps are actually ways of healing our relationship with the earth. And I think that if people can just slowly start building that, and again, it's like people feel the need to just change everything right away, and that's not sustainable either. So
Mhm.
take it a step at a time, like take care of your house plants a little better and talk to them and form a relationship with them first, if
Yeah,
that's like where
true.
you need to start, like because you're seeing them as beings. So even that like rewiring of a mental framework changes the way that you begin to view nature and the way it's like
Mhm.
a domino effect sort of. And then I often will lead people in writing love letters to Mother Earth as a way
Mm.
of especially with like predominantly white audiences, because um it is it kind of throws people off balance, and it helps
Mhm.
them recognize maybe even something in their child self that was very connected to the earth that they've lost.
Mhm.
It's a really beautiful way to sort of reclaim that wonderful, like, childlike curiosity with the world, and to understand that, you write a letter to someone you're in relationship with. So,
Right.
if you begin writing letters to Mother Earth, then you're recognizing there's a relationship to be repaired. And that, I think, could be really transformational for people who and Indigenous people too, we could all do it,
Yeah.
like, it's for anybody just to begin sort of going back to that relationship. And I realized last year when I released one of my children's books that it kind of registered for me that all of my writing is about like kind of the general theme of my work and my writing is caring for ourselves, caring for each other, and
Mhm.
caring for Mother Earth. And to me, all of those things are connected. Like if we
Yeah.
begin healing our relationship to the earth, we're going to be healed ourselves and we're going to start loving others better because it's all connected. It's a holistic relationship. So I just think about that a lot, that it's all tied together. And if we can
Mhm.
see that and understand that and embody it, then I think we could do like so much good and bring so much beauty to a really hurting world.
Mhm. I coulda used your advice when I was, like, 20 years old. I house sat for one of my friends for, like, a month, and she had probably about 20 plants, and by the end of it, they were all dead, but, like, I I could barely take care of myself at 20, so
Oh, I've had struggles. No,
let
yeah,
alone the 20
I understand. I've done it
plants.
too. We're not,
But I could have talked to them better and gave them water, but in the same breath, I was probably just as dehydrated as the
yeah,
plants were, so
yeah, right. Oh
I
man,
love
even
that
that's
you
a lesson. Yeah.
I know, right? I love that you bring it together, though. Taking care of the earth is taking care of yourself. And when you think of Indigenous futurism, what do you think of? What do you hope for the future when it comes to Indigenous lives and Indigenous people
Oh.
in our communities? What do you hope to see within Indigenous futurism?
Mhm. That's a beautiful question. Um, I think about, the our like 7 generations prophecy a lot and future generations, and I share about it a lot with people. And even in my own kids, I see this like um this tension of like being Potawatomi and celebrating that, but also just seeing and feeling the pain of it. And
Mm,
I want to like take that pain from them. I want it to be it's been better for them than it was for me in ways because in my family, there was just a lot of silence. We didn't know how to talk about being
Right.
Potawatomi. We didn't know how to celebrate it. And I wanted more bravery to just be open about it with my kids and with the world. And so I hope that in the future, like there's even more of that bravery to talk about where we've been, but to talk about like the beautiful stuff that is tethering us and connecting us to who we are. And um, I just picture like what I've seen in the last few years, even like an abundance of that, but this like the creativity that's been showing up in like music and television and movies and publishing, like in all sorts of art, like Indigenous people are really showing up and telling our
Mhm.
own stories. And I just like see that like on a huge level, just all over the globe, like when like
Yes.
Indigenous stories globally have so much healing in them. And just to see that even more. Like we love watching like cooking shows. Anytime there's like an Indigenous artist on there, like cooking a dish, I'm like weeping on the couch, because it's
Oh.
just like our stories are embedded in the things that we do in the world. So to have future generations be just like bold and joyful and
Mm,
celebratory of who they are and where they've come from, and not ignoring the pain, but like alchemizing it into something just
mhm,
gorgeous and real and deep, and having the world actually like accept it and see it and honor it.
mhm.
That's what I see and what I hope for.
Yeah, no, me too. I feel like indigenous knowledge systems and the way we heal ourselves is really what's needed.
Yeah.
Is the antidote to the disconnection and the fragmentation that we're feeling
Mhm.
from technology, from colonization, from capitalism. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for sharing your story here with us. Where can people support your work? And could you also speak to the book that's going to be coming out
Yeah.
later this year?
Yeah. So Everything is a Story comes out in October, early October. So I'm really excited about it. The best way for people to really get in touch with me and sort of support me is to join my Substack. That's just a really wonderful growing community. So the Liminality Journal, and that's all on my website. And I'm as far as social media, I'm mostly on Instagram, but I enjoy my Substack more. So if you
Right.
want a deeper kind of connection, then definitely go visit the Liminality Journal. That's the best place to kind of know what's happening with me. So
Awesome. Well, thank you
yeah,
so much, Caitlin, for being
thank
here,
you.
for sharing your story, for sharing your wisdom. Make sure to go read her books and also subscribe to her Substack. I'll leave it all below in the show notes. Hi, hi. Thank you so much for listening.